So if you lay down at night and your toes are just kind of flopping towards the end of the bed, your tibs are weak.
There is absolutely no sensible, credible, logical explanation for when you lay in bed, when your feet naturally relax down, that meaning you have a problem. And for Huberman to say it so matter of fact, like it's known established science, is complete and utter nonsense. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and my goal in this channel is to teach you about the medical side of the sports world. And sometimes that means calling out and addressing some controversial and honestly flat out ridiculous stuff that we see on the internet. Dr. Huberman is a neuroscientist, and without a doubt, he's an extremely smart person who I think has done genuinely a lot of good to help people learn and become better with their wellness, their self-care, and a lot of great things. But what often happens with a lot of these types of personalities who venture into the social media space and become very famous and well known because of their initial area of expertise is they run out of things within their area of expertise to talk about. And so over time, you start to see them stray into other areas of science or medicine based on what's popular out there in the culture. This podcast that he was on with Tim Ferris back in 2023 is full of absolute just nonsensical reasoning and rubbish when it comes to talking about tib raises and shin splints and flat feet and floppiness in your feet when you lay in bed that is just complete, flawed, utter nonsense. I'm going to walk through some of these parts and just talk about where he's completely flat out wrong and just help to actually tell the truth about some of these things. We'll dive into that in a minute, but first let's go ahead and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video before we dive in and react to this podcast episode. This video is sponsored by HelloFresh. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit and a service that I have been using for months, long before HelloFresh reached out to me to sponsor a video. Whether your New Year's resolution is to eat better, save money, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you out with all three. They have fresh ingredients with chef-crafted recipes that are delivered straight to your front door with simple, easy to follow instructions to make every meal an absolute breeze. They have their biggest menu yet with over 45 plus dinner options and an even wider variety to help meet different healthy lifestyles. They have calorie smart, protein smart recipes, and my personal favorite, they don't skimp on the protein, which is really appreciated for a hungry fellow like myself. Right now, if you sign up for HelloFresh and click the link in the description or use my code, you're going to get free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. Despite all this great stuff though, my wife and I's favorite part of HelloFresh is the time that we get to spend and what we learn by making these recipes. I learn how different ingredients go together and we get to have the fun preparing a meal together that doesn't have the added stress of trying to do all the shopping and preparation ourselves. So start your new year off right and take advantage of HelloFresh today. And remember, you're gonna get that free breakfast item with every box with your active subscription. Just click that link down below in the description or scan my code to get started. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to our learning. Let's get started here and take a listen.
So I'll just walk through it. I'm really big on tib raises. I warm up with tib raises. Training the
tib
front.
raises meaning like the tibialis anterior,
yeah.
like dorsiflexion, raising your toes towards your knee.
So this is a huge addition.
Great accuracy right there. Yes, tibialis anterior is a muscle that helps to dorsiflex your ankle. Let's take a look at it with our anatomy tool. With our biodigital tool here, we're looking at the front of a right lower extremity. So up here is going to be the knee, the femur, and then this is the tibia. The anterior tibialis is a muscle that sits in the anterior compartment of the lower legs. There's different compartments. There's 4 in the lower leg. There's the anterior in the front, the lateral on the outside, the deep posterior, and the superficial posterior, where a bunch of different muscles are contained. So tibialis anterior sits anterior in the front of the tibia, tibialis, so pretty aptly named. The muscle is going to originate up here on the front portion of the tibia so it doesn't cross the knee joint. And then the tendon is going to come down and the tendon is going to cross the ankle and then insert on a handful of different bones here, but primarily kind of around this middle cuneiform and first metatarsal. So this is the tendon of the anterior tib. Whenever you activate it, it's going to pull upwards and it's going to dorsiflex the ankle. All very appropriate, very accurate stuff. Other muscles in this anterior compartment, you have the extensor digitorum longus and the extensor hallucis longus lifting up the toe, the big toe, and then the extensor digitorum longus lifting up the rest of the toes.
I warm up with tib work. Why? Training my tibs, as they're called, has
tibs of the new biceps.
Definitely makes the calf work more effective.
Mm-hmm.
Never could grow calves or get my calves strong, gotten them substantially bigger and stronger by training tibs, but more importantly, perhaps.
So this is something you hear a lot, and I think that's part of why these tib raises have become like the new hot thing in the social media kind of fitness influencer world, is that, of course, everybody wants big calves, right? That video is going to take off if you can talk about, the secret to getting big calves. And so presenting tib raises as something to get bigger calves is a very easy way to make people want to do it and to kind of latch on to this newfound secret in medicine that nobody has known about. But there is no real even logic behind that, because when you're doing a traditional tib raise, tibialis anterior raise, you're getting a little bit of passive stretch on your gastroc. And there's been some new literature that actually, specifically with the pecs, just doing stretching of the muscle can stimulate some hypertrophy, but nothing to the extent that's going to cause that muscle to hypertrophy to where you're getting stronger. And Huberman talks later on about, this idea like you have to work both edges of the muscle for balance, right? The calves, and you have to work the anterior tib, so the front and the back of the lower leg. And I think that's a good concept, but simply going in and doing tibialis anterior raises is not going to magically unlock your gastroc into becoming stronger. It could very well help with some pain you might be dealing with. We'll talk about shin splints in a little bit. So I think there is some true good times to strengthen your tib, but it's not this matter of fact, like he's stating here, that, it's the secret. It's the secret to unlocking your calf strengthening. That's just a way to get people to buy in, to make it feel like you are an expert and know what you're talking about.
But more importantly, perhaps, helps posture, got rid of my right side sciatica. I always had this right side kind of leaning in pain, and
Again, there's just no logical even theory for why strengthening a muscle that only crosses your ankle joint is going to fix people's posture and sciatica. And again, these are sort of tools that you see people using in this world to get more attention, to sort of get more popularity and credibility with things, is, of course, sciatica, right? Very big buzzword to talk about in social media fitness. Everybody wants to know about the secret for sciatica. So we're hitting calf strengthening, we're hitting sciatica, we're hitting posture. He's hitting all these buzzwords that he knows people are going to be interested in, and framing it in the context of these tibialis raises are going to suddenly and magically unlock that. There's just no even biomechanical theory or basis, certainly no fundamental research, right? Dr. Huberman likes to share and talk about the importance of evidence. There's zero evidence out there to support any of that. The other part here with Huberman that you have to remember is he is doing all kinds of other things in the meantime. He's doing more general strengthening. He talks about the squats he's doing. He's doing a lot of other exercises that are good for sciatica, that are good for posture. It's not just the tib raises that he's doing that are fixing his sciatica. But when this stuff is presented to a casual audience, they think that I have sciatica. If I start doing tib raises, I'm going to get better. When in reality, it's multifactorial. It's everything else that he's doing. It's the core strengthening. It's the exercise. It's the diet. It's the whole body fitness that's helping fix his sciatica and his posture and whatever this vague, non-specific, thing that people can probably relate to of, oh yeah, my right side's off. And so there's a really, really important caveat that we understand when you're talking about musculoskeletal medicine, that Huberman here, again, because you're not an expert, you're not really trained in this stuff, you don't communicate that across.
I'm going to get teased for saying this. For me, anyway, I can run like a beast now. No knee pain, no back pain, no shoulder pain. I can just run and run and run. And so training your tibs turns out to be key, and it turns out it has everything to do with
again, right? He's been doing so many other things in the past couple of years, not just isolated tib raises. And so to present tib raises as this magic cure-all, again, it's almost like you're trying to get people to convince into your program, your system of tib raises being this magical thing that's going to fix all your problems. And I'm sorry, that just doesn't exist. He's been, again, exercising in general. He's been strength training. He's been eating healthy. All that stuff is what's helping him run like a beast, not training some isolated lower leg muscle that doesn't even cross your knee joint. It's just ridiculous again.
Bring your toe, we'll avoid jargon here, bring your toe closer to the kneecap as you generate your stride, not having the floppy feet. So if you lay down at night and your toes are just kind of flopping towards the end of the bed, your tibs are weak. A lot of people with knee issues have weak tibs.
This was the most ridiculous part of this whole conversation. And it's something that, again, you see in this kind of playbook of people who are trying to present this expertise of trying to get people to identify something that they will do, think that it's abnormal in them, and because you said it, they suddenly need to start doing this thing. There is absolutely no sensible, credible, logical explanation for when you lay in bed, when your feet naturally relax down, that meaning you have a problem. And for Huberman to say it so matter of fact, like it's known established science, is complete and utter nonsense. But because he says this, because he's Andrew Huberman, who everybody listens to and thinks is this all-knowing person, people are going to go, they're going to lay down in bed at night, they're going to say, oh my gosh, my feet relax, and they drop forward like they naturally should, and think that means they have a problem. And this gets at a core problem with these sort of fitness influencer guru types of people, is you're looking for a problem that's not even there. Unless you have some specific pathology, pain, shin splints maybe, like we'll talk about in a little bit, there's zero reason why you need to go out and start training your tibialis anterior muscle. And if you go and you decide, hey, look, my feet naturally, like they're supposed to, relax and flop down in bed, and then go start training your tibialis, you're probably going to hurt yourself in some way. But it's this idea that these folks like Huberman can say, hey, well, if this happens to you, it's a clear sign that your tibs are weak and you need to strengthen your tibs. It's complete and utter BS. Your feet are supposed to naturally relax when you lay down like that. It's good. In fact, if your muscles didn't relax, if you laid in bed and your feet were just rigid like this, that would mean you have abnormal spasticity in your lower leg that you need to see a doctor for. So this idea of like latching onto something that is visual, it's provoking, everybody will see it and do it, then gets them to buy in and think that you're more of an expert and they need to go strengthen and train their tibs. It's complete and utter just nonsense. And it needs to stop because these people don't know what they're talking about within this area of medicine.
A lot of people with knee issues have weak tibs.
Well, again, another just a generic statement. People with knee issues have weak tibs. There are so many different things that can cause somebody to have knee pain, and to generalize it on a podcast as if you have knee issues, you must have weak tibs is again part of this playbook of these people who try and do this kind of stuff on the internet to get you to buy into what they're saying. Someone says, oh yeah, my knee hurts, I must have weak tibs, when in reality, you might have a meniscus tear or a focal cartilage injury or pezanserine bursitis or hamstring tendonitis or a whole host of other things that strengthening your tibialis anterior might actually be the wrong thing to do.
Well, hold on. So if you're in the bed, you got your sheets and blankets on top and your feet are flopping forward, are you sleeping like a G.I. Joe figure with your toes pulled up to your knees?
No,
what's happening?
No. I just mean that if your toes are in a state of kind of like flaccid relaxation, if your feet are flaccid,
flaccid toes,
not
folks.
good.
Red light.
A lot of people who run are smacking their feet against the ground.
Totally.
You know, Ben cued people to.
Again, it's ridiculous. So the ironic thing here is the anterior tibialis, the tibs as he calls them, don't even affect your toes. Your tibialis anterior is not doing anything to dorsiflex or extend your toes. It's a completely different muscle. And so that right there proves that he just doesn't know what he's talking about in this regard. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing wrong about you laying in bed and your feet naturally relaxing. And so don't get people fixated on a problem that's not even there, because then people panic, they worry, they think, oh my gosh, I have this problem, when they don't have a problem because you're telling them misinformation.
Ground.
Totally.
You know, Ben cued people to this. Tib work, okay, tib work is great for the calves, it's great for the knee, it's great for the hip. That's all very clear. And I think just a lot of people have overtrained their calves and not balanced it out with tib work. It would be like doing a lot of bicep work and not a lot of tricep work, or a lot of quad work, not a lot of hamstring work. So you have to work both sides of the limb. And I think our friend Kelly Starrett would agree.
I'm sure he would, yeah.
Tib work has changed everything for me. Posturally, I have no pain any longer.
I just want to lodge.
Again, this has nothing to do with you. You have been doing so many other things to help your pain. And so to say tib work, it's the golden goose here, I don't have pain, I don't believe it. I'm not buying it.
The work side, this may be a question for Ben or someone more qualified, but one of the challenges that I've had,
I agree, it would be a great question for someone more qualified.
Decades, shin splints. And my dorsiflexion is actually seemingly, from a strength perspective, pretty decent. Ankle mobility also pretty decent, although the left ankle's been broken so many times.
So Tim is saying right there that he thinks his tibialis is actually pretty strong. He thinks his ankle mobility is pretty good. Good.
Ankle's been broken so many times that it's a little crunchy. But the point of all of that is that my ankle mobility is pretty good. My dorsiflexion strength seems pretty good, but I always feel like the front of my shins are about to explode. Someone could just pop them like a balloon with a pin. Mm-hmm. And I've not figured out a way to address this.
Yeah, I vote tib work. I used to have terrible shin splints.
Okay.
Yeah, terrible shin splints and also.
This is another thing that you see pretty often on these types of podcasts, is this generalization of assuming what somebody has as a diagnosis. What Tim is explaining here sounds like textbook chronic exertional compartment syndrome. So this feeling of pressure where you feel like the muscle is going to explode, that is not classic what we hear for shin splints. It sounds like he's describing exertional compartment syndrome, which is a very real thing. Most commonly affects that anterior compartment where the tibialis anterior resides, where you get buildup in pressure in that compartment when you exercise, where people will say it feels like it's going to explode. They say this exact same thing that Tim is saying. And in those cases, if you have compartment syndrome, exercising your tibialis anterior is the worst thing you could do. In fact, in those patients who have anterior compartment exertional compartment syndrome, we encourage them to start developing more forefoot running, more forefoot stride, because when you run on your heel, you require more anterior tibialis work to control that dorsiflexion, to control that descent of the foot. And so if Tim actually has exertional compartment syndrome, which it sounds like he might, Huberman telling him to do tib raises is the worst thing for him to do and is going to make his problem worse. But because they talk in these just general approaches of, well, I must have shin splints, and Huberman says, well, this is what you need to do for shin splints, you get more of this misinformation. Now, let's talk about shin splints, because there's actually some validity here with the tibialis and what could be going on with shin splints. And for that, we're going to go back to our anatomy model. So if we look here again at our leg, the tibia, right? Tibia, shin splints. What we think is happening with shin splints is there's this layer along the bone, specifically usually the medial kind of back half of the tibia, called the periosteum. It's this outer lining of the bone. And there's some continuance between the periosteum and the fascia that goes over the anterior tibialis. And so there seems to be some, at least anatomic connection between the anterior tibialis and the periosteum around the tibia that can be affected with shin splints. And so I agree, if somebody has shin splints, again, this is the difference between you have a specific diagnosis versus you just need to do it for longevity and wellness. I do think there's value in doing some anterior tibialis strengthening to potentially influence that pull on the periosteum or offset some of the gastrocnemius strength. So don't get me wrong, there's some true validity and reasons and timing to do tib raises, but not because your feet flop down in bed when you lay like a normal person.
And also pain in my shins just from skateboarding, taking so many shit.
These kind of fitness gurus, everybody always has shin splints, right? They all have shin splints. They all have sciatica. They all have posture problems. Again, you see this pattern. We're kind of hitting these buzzwords of things that get people interested in the medical field on the internet.
Also given me, I used to think I had flat feet. Thought I have flat feet. That's my source of my problem. And I'd do all this toe strengthening, foot strengthening stuff, all these people in the yoga community.
Another thing that a lot of these people tend to have, right? Flat feet. Another one. We've hit them all. We've hit flat feet, sciatica, shin splints, posture problems. We've kind of hit the trifecta here of social media, fitness guru types of content.
Turned out I don't have flat feet. It turns out that my tibs were weak. And so the foot wasn't resting in the right position. So for me, it's been a game changer. Also, you don't need any specialized equipment. There is
more absolute nonsense. So yes, one of the tibialis muscles helps to influence the shape of the foot in the arch support. But it's not the tibialis anterior, it's the tibialis posterior. Let's look back at our anatomy model. So the tibialis anterior, somebody who's not an expert in this, who's not entirely educated, might look at the tibialis anterior and say, oh, well, its job is to dorsiflex the ankle. Makes sense. If my tibialis anterior is weak, it's going to cause my ankle to plantar flex down. It seems like a logical step to take. But it's actually the tibialis posterior that influences our arch height. This muscle and tendon highlighted is the tibialis posterior. It actually sits in that deep posterior compartment, right? We were talking about our compartments earlier. Runs here through the tarsal tunnel on the medial side of the ankle, goes down and inserts primarily on the navicular bone. This anatomy model is not 100% accurate, just for kind of your reference. But the posterior tibialis is a very real muscle and tendon that's involved with foot shape and flat feet. And people who have posterior tibialis tendon dysfunction get progressive collapse of their foot because it's not there to help bolster and support the arch. So yes, your tibialis plays a role in your foot shape and your arch height, but not the tibialis anterior. It's the tibialis posterior. But because these people aren't experts, they don't know the right connections, they make these leaps that seem plausible on paper. And a host like Tim Ferris doesn't really know the difference. And so he says, interesting, writes it down. And everybody is supposed to accept that if they have flat feet, they just need to do a bunch of tibialis raises, which is, again, completely wrong. I think the biggest lesson in all this for me, and I think what you should take away from it, is don't go looking for problems that you don't have. I don't want to go so far as to say that this is like being a grifter and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think Huberman has like bad intentions. I think, again, it just comes down to the sense that when you become so famous so quickly for being an expert in your field, again, this man's an expert. He is a fantastic scientist in his field of study. But that doesn't mean that you're an expert in everything else. But people in those areas, you quickly start to think that you are an expert in those areas. I've gotten into some trouble with it on this channel, right? I've talked about some stuff involving like endocrinology in the past that was outside of my expertise, learn from that. And so you need to be very careful about how people perceive you when you talk about something. Just because you're an expert in a scientific field doesn't mean you're an expert in all scientific fields in medicine. But people hear this stuff, they look to Huberman as this expert, this resource, and think, oh my goodness, I have all these problems, my posture, my sciatica, my shin splints, my flat feet. Tib raises are the solution for everything. It's just simply not true. Don't go looking for problems that you don't have. Don't lay in bed at night and see your feet naturally fall forward and think that you have a problem, because it just causes you to get stressed and anxious thinking something's wrong with you that's not the case. I'm surprised this hasn't happened with other muscles. Like, I think the tibialis anterior is just the latest one. Before this, it was the VMO, right? The VMO was the big sexy muscle. Now it's the tibialis anterior. It's probably going to be something like the sartorius or the gracilis next. This sexy sounding muscle that people typically don't exercise and train because frankly, there's no real reason to, gets blamed for all these problems, and you can latch onto it and use it as the next big thing to promote and make yourself out to seem to be some expert. So I encourage you, when you're consuming this type of content, whether it's Huberman or Rogan or Lex Fridman, any of these people that sit in this sort of podcasting club that we all know about, know what they're experts in and know what they're not experts in. And if they're not experts in certain things, take everything they say with a grain of salt, because all this stuff about tib raises, your floppy feet, your shin splints, your flat feet, it's honestly a bunch of nonsense that needs a lot more expert context behind it. That's it for the video, everybody. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.